but you can make an impact, and the impact that you make will change your life. People will appreciate you to an extent that you will not understand. When you save a life and you look that person in the face, the amount of emotion that'll go through you will amaze you.
You guys have written an amazing book together, and I received it this week, basically the day it came out, and I absolutely devoured it. It was such an easy read because it's just story after amazing story after amazing story. And Bernie, you've lived an incredible life and had an incredible career. You founded Home Depot in 1979. And I was curious because that was around the time there was high interest rates and some similarities to today. Is almost a similar environment. So I was curious, having lived and operated in a high interest rate environment like that, how would you advise business leaders running companies today, especially publicly traded ones?
Oh, look, it's 79 and today are two different times. Number one, we don't have the regulations that we had now then. So we were free. The government let us operate. And by that, I mean, we're able to do things that we weren't confined to. Today, you have the SEC, the FAC, the FTC, the SD, all the alphabets. Getting involved in your business, it's not that easy. But the times were the same. Interest rates were very high. People, manufacturers especially, couldn't produce product. They didn't have the money. So, normally we have terms like 60 days before we pay for bills. We made a policy of paying people COD, deliver the product to us. We will pay you the day you bring it to the loading dock. That way we kept so many manufacturers in business, and some of these manufacturers today are some of the biggest in the country. They've grown from that, but they would have gone out of business. And today's environment is the same way. Listen, I don't know how these people survive with the number one, high interest rates, the cost of inflation, the fact that you have to keep raising prices to customers, the fact that you can't find people to work because they're paying more not to work than work. It's a bad environment. But, entrepreneurs have a way. Entrepreneurs figure out a way to get through and to make it happen. And there will be plenty of people who will survive. And those who survive will be the victors. They'll come out ahead and they'll be better in the future, providing there is a future out here. If things don't get worse in the handbag, which, is happening every day here today.
That COD policy, that I'm sure established a lot of goodwill with your vendors. Did that become sort of a competitive advantage for you guys early on? Did you see that kind of karma, if you will, come back to you in other ways?
Oh, sure. We had money because we had gone public, and we raised money to open new stores, and we were just very careful. Look, if you don't have product in the stores, you don't have anything to sell. You have nothing to sell, you're a dead duck. So we had to figure out a way to do it. That was the only way to do it. And this is a typical entrepreneurial thing that happened to us over 30 years. You always had these things happen, and you have to respond to it in a way that's economically feasible and makes sense and keeps your business going.
You were 49 years old when you founded Home Depot. So you had actually already had a successful career in other ways, and you had seen a few different market cycles already. How does today's market environment compare to other recessionary times you've witnessed in the past?
Well, I think much worse. This energy issue is a major issue. Everything runs on energy. We have a president who wants to change the world, in 10 days. That should take, thousands of days. And he's pushing it. And I'm afraid it's going to have and it already has. Inflation is just rampant. People don't have money to pay for food. Filling up a gas tank, and I'm thinking about our customers, especially the contractors. Diesel fuel, they fill up their trucks. It's over $150, and they're getting killed. They can't pass it on to the consumer. They pass it on to the consumer. The consumer doesn't want to pay it. They lose the job. So it's not good for anybody. And unless there's something happen in November, I don't think good things are going to coming out of this. I think it's going to be a long time, and we will have a recession. I just believe it. I don't see how we could possibly avoid it. And I hate to be a naysayer because I'm normally a very up person, but in this case, you have a president who's driving you there. I mean, that's his goal. He's behind that wheel. He's got his foot on the gas, and he's going there. And there seems to be nobody to stop him.
You know, the book repeatedly promotes capitalism and free enterprise. I was just speaking with economist Richard Duncan, who claims that we are no longer really in capitalism. We are in what he calls creditism. And that's mainly because our credit growth as a company seems to be the major contribution to asset prices increasing and GDP growth. What, if anything, is different about capitalism today versus when you were starting out?
Well, in those days, it was a very simple matter. We borrowed money. We opened stores. We hired people. We bought product. We sold product. We made money. We opened more stores. When we found more stores to open than we could handle, we went public again. And we went public basically to open stores. So today, I think we have something like 2,700 stores. We have 500,000 associates. This all came about through capitalism, not socialism. The government did anything for us. What they did was stay out of our way, but they're not staying out of the way today. And you have, as I said, these alphabet bureaucracies that are getting in the way with the SEC, the FTC, diversity. I mean,
red tape.
My God, it's just, I would kill myself today. If I was CEO, I would jump off a bridge. We see a lot of CEOs jumping off of bridges. It's impossible.
Yeah, I'm amazing you have as much hair left as you have, because I mean, you must have had it a little bit easier than some of the people who are starting businesses today in the regulation side of things. A lot of people pulling their hair out, it would seem. Catherine, I'm curious to pull you in here because there's a lot about Bernie's youth in the book, and it seems to be littered with these scenes out of West Side Story. It would seem a lot of rough and tumble encounters, joining a gang. Bernie, what kept you on the straight and narrow? And Catherine, how fun was it to dig into some of these stories?
Well, first of all, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. Not a nice town. It was a tough town. We grew up in a very bad neighborhood. We were very, very poor. And you either fought or you survived. If you didn't fight, you didn't survive. And so I was a fighter. And I got into these altercations. And believe me, my life was on the line many times. And I decided to join a gang in order to survive. For a short period of time, the gang became my family. And I learned a lot by that on how to work with people that were disparate. Not I thought myself. These guys they didn't carry guns. They didn't carry knives, but they were bad guys. And I learned a lot of lessons in life and how to handle life because of that. And, you know, as you go through life, all of these experiences become part of who you are. So that I've always been a fighter, and I don't back down, but I try to think things carefully. I don't hit people anymore, although I like I think seriously about it today, but you try to work it out. You try to figure it out. You use your common sense. But it was an experience that made up part of my life, certainly my early life.
Catherine, yeah.
Yeah, well, Trey, writing about this there's no other way to describe it. Bernie, it was just a ball of fun. We had all these great interviews and conversations about what it was like to grow up as the fourth child, sort of making a way out of no way, living in a tenement, getting into Yankee Stadium. There's a great story about sitting with a priest, which you have to read when you get to the book. But what's really amazing about Bernie's early life, and I think this really shaped the framework of the book, is that he realized at the very youngest age that if he was going to be successful in anything, he was going to have to do it yourself, right? That he had to figure it out on his own. And so everything from every job, the working, in the ice cream, scooping ice cream to bowling alleys and just all kinds of amazing jobs, working at the Catskills as a waiter and then becoming a comedian and then a hypnotist. It was like West Side Story and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel all wrapped up together.
But I can't sing.
Yeah, that's true. I never did ask Bernie to sing. But when you read the book, and Bernie was very intentional in this book about making sure that it would reach a wide audience, that it would be really funny, really candid. To know Bernie Marcus, reading this book is like going to lunch with Bernie Marcus or going to breakfast with Bernie, right? You get this amazing ringside seat. And in some ways, the early stories are some of the funniest. Doing swim team naked. That alone is worth buying the book. But it weaves itself into the theme of the book, which is that you have to learn to do it yourself. So there's early experiences that as he goes through retail, ultimately through Home Depot, and then into philanthropy. Do it yourself is the theme. And that's why we call the book Kick Up Some Dust, that Bernie Marcus has kicked up a lot of dust in his lifetime.
That the gang thing and some of the other stories really stood out because it showed very clearly that you had this skill, or this is innate skill, even to ingratiate yourself, even to people like Big Jim, who's featured in the book, and who might appear to be enemies at first and later become friends, it would seem. So was this a natural skill that you were born with, or did you pick it up from someone else? Was it out of survival? How were you able to climb the ranks in so many different areas of your life?
Well, early age, I was really left alone. I was born. My story is that I was never really meant to be here. My mother had me because she was crippled and couldn't walk. She had me for a medical purpose. And I was born with brothers and sisters way older than myself. And I was like a waylay. They didn't know. They're like, what is this kid doing here? What is he hanging around for? And I lived my life. Nobody knew where I was. I went where I wanted to go. I did what I wanted to do. And I did things nobody else did. I would go to Giants Stadium, Evans Field, Yankee Stadium. I went to put up circus tents by myself. My mother never knew where I was. Nobody knew where I was. And all of these experiences became experiences of my life. They formed who I am. And they taught me, number one, that you have to be able to communicate with people. That wherever you go, no matter what you do, if you can't communicate, you're a dead duck. And I carried that through my entire life. Being able to sit with somebody and have a conversation and learn what they knew and try to incorporate it into your own life became very important to me. So that was all part of my upbringing. And it brought me to, the ability to run a company later on when I ran Handy Dan and other companies. You have to have that skill. Today, I'm not sure that Harvard Business School teaches that. I don't know how they could teach it because they're busy talking and writing papers, and they don't, just the art of listening and the art of being able to incorporate what the thoughts are and come out with your own ideas. That's what communication really is. And that's what a great entrepreneur is able to do. I found that same thing with Sam Walton. I found it with all the great entrepreneurs that I worked with. They all had that ability. You could sit and talk for hours, and you kind of got into each other. You understood each other, and you learned something every time you had that sit down. You walked away and said, wow, that was a great experience. I'm going to incorporate something. And that became part and parcel. It started when I was a young kid.
It reminds me of, how Buffett doesn't have his college degree framed on his wall, but he does have a Dale Carnegie certificate hanging on his wall. So, Catherine, you mentioned Bernie becoming a hypnotist. There's so many wild stories in this book, but becoming a hypnotist may be the top. And Bernie, I'm kind of curious. I mean, this skill of becoming a hypnotist, which you apparently became quite good at, maybe too good at in some cases, did that help in business later in life as far as commanding a room, negotiating a deal? Were you using any magic tricks along the way?
No, I think it taught me how to concentrate on somebody, how to look at them and understand them, look them in the eyes and understand them. And, but it also taught me, it's what I learned through hypnotism. Remember, I learned hypnotism because I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a psychiatrist, actually. I could have been somebody. I really could have been somebody. And so that was all part and parcel. And I never did nasty things. I never made fun of people. When I put people up on a stage, I never abused them. I did really interesting things. I stopped them from smoking, bad habits that they had. And all of those things were part and parcel of skills that I developed myself. And as I said, if I had been a psychiatrist, I could have been very successful, I think, because I would have incorporated all of those things into my practice. But lo and behold, that never could happen.
I found it interesting that your mother went from working in a sweatshop more or less early on to ultimately teaching business. Was she an influence for you and helped develop your business acumen?
No, where she played the role was giving me the confidence of looking at the bright side of everything. The glass is half empty, but the glass is half full. My mother's philosophy was the glass is half full. And she was a very positive, so no matter what happened, she could find goodness. If somebody died, it was like painful, an uncle or somebody died. My mother would find a good reason for it. She'd say, he's now happy. He's now suffering. He's not suffering anymore. In other words, there was a reason he died. It was good. And she taught me that don't look back. One of the things she taught me was don't look back. When you do something, you did it, move on. And I carried that all of my life. Until I wrote this book with Catherine. Well, Catherine will tell you that some of the stories that I resurrected, I was astounded at myself at some of the things that happened to me because I never thought about it. I never went back and looked at these things. And a lot of what I found out, number one, that was kind of depressing to me, but I grew up in the 50s, having been born in 1929. I never realized how anti-Semitism was in the United States. It was brutal. You couldn't get a job at a corporation. You couldn't get a job in a law firm. You couldn't get a job in a manufacturing company if you were Jewish. It wasn't until a Jewish state, Israel, was formed that these things turned around. But I'm sorry to say, I see the world turning around the other way now. It's going back to where it was. And part of my philanthropy today is fighting that and making sure it doesn't happen. I don't want Jewish kids. We fought 2,000 years suffering anti-Semitism. I don't want to see it go on any longer. And I don't want to have careers. And it is on the campuses. It's horrible. I couldn't get into Harvard as a Jewish kid. I don't think you can get into Harvard as a Jewish kid today, unless you have a lot of money.
Yeah, there's an interesting part in the book there about how you had to turn down a bribe, so to speak, to get into Harvard because they were basically enforcing a $10,000 entry fee, right, for people, beyond their allotment, I guess, for Jewish kids, which is quite concerning and fast. The things you went through are quite incredible. Your father was a carpenter, and a lot of folks will likely immediately think, oh, what was the case? That's why you started Home Depot or even got in a handy Dan. What might surprise our audience about you and your handiwork abilities?
My lack of. No, my father wouldn't let me go near a job. My father built, he was a very intense guy. He built butcher blocks, where they hung meat. And every once in a while, when he ran late, he would ask my brothers and myself to come down and to knock nails in the oak and try to get this job done. And then he would stay there all night pulling every nail that we did out because it wasn't done well. So he didn't give me any confidence in home improvement. I will tell you, I took nothing from him as just a hardworking guy who really broke his back to feed his family. That's what I got out of him.
Trey, we have this great end to the book in the epilogue. Bernie, if you'll remember, the epilogue is called Later Equals Never. And we open it. For those of you who've made it this far, I have a dirty secret for you. I can't build anything. And Bernie told me that at the end. And we had this whole project, worked for 2 years. And he's like, yeah, I can't use any of those tools. So it was so funny. But Bernie, that was also intentional on your part. You tell a story about why you didn't want to learn those.
No, I spent all my time in the stores, Trey. And I would walk a store and pick up a tool and say, what is this? Tell me how you use it. And I did it out of ignorance, total ignorance. And then they would have to explain to me how they use the tool. And if I understood their explanation, I knew they were well trained. If they said, well, follow directions on a box, that was not going to work. That's not a Home Depot associate. We wanted our people to know more than that and help the customer, like myself, do things that they never could have done before, which is what built the Home Depot, the do-it-yourself business.
Yeah, there's these nice tidbits in the book about how these associates would often even direct you elsewhere if there was maybe a tool or at one point nails, right? Where they would want to direct you somewhere else. I mean, that was the integrity that you would see from these associates. They wanted to do right by the customer, even if it wasn't at Home Depot. So while you might not have been good at building cabinetry, you were certainly great at building culture. And that's very clear in the book. You wrote in the book also that success is rarely as interesting as the struggle. So I'd like to focus on a few of Home Depot's struggles, one of which was buying Bowater Home Centers. What were the lessons derived from this venture that went sideways?
Arrogance. Arrogance. We looked at these stores. They had great locations in Dallas and Houston, and they fit really well with us. And we did a cursory on how they ran the business. And we thought that we were smart enough that we could take all of these people and turn them into Home Depot associates overnight. And we had great confidence and didn't even think twice about it. And then we opened the business and it turned out to be a freaking disaster. Almost took us down. came close to closing our stores because we had to throw people in from our stores into their stores. And we virtually ended up with nobody working there that worked there before. Well, the entire management had to be moved out. Almost every employee was moved out. We learned arrogance, and we learned that number two things, arrogance is one, and number one is due diligence, that you have to be smart and you have to do the right kind of due diligence. And if you get both right, you'll be okay. And I'm happy to say that thereafter, we didn't have a calamity that hit us in the years to come. I will say that, when they say Bernie Marcus did this and Bernie Marcus did this, Bernie Marcus didn't do this. I had great people around me. Arthur Blank, Ron Brill, Pat Farah. I had great people that loved to work at Home Depot, understood the culture, had it in their guts. The key was to have it in their guts, that we believed in taking care of the customer and taking care of our associate. And if we took care of the both, everything would work out for the best. And we live by that. And we even live by that today. Today, it's prevalent in all of our stores the same way.
Catherine, maybe on this point, you could share a quick story about a forklift and how that might have changed some culture behavior in the Bowater stores.
Right. Oh, yeah, Bernie, if you remember the forklift story, that Home Depot, and this was the culture of Arthur and Kenny and Bernie, right? That you walked the stores, you knew what was going on. And this manager never was in the store and, was sitting in his office. So they got a forklift and essentially flattened his office to show the importance of this culture. And Bernie and Arthur are very different, very complementary. Arthur was your numbers guy. Bernie was on the floor. There was no, dust on Bernie. He walked those stores. He knew those associates. He talked to customers. The nail story that you alluded to earlier. Bernie, remember you're in the parking lot and you see the guy and you start helping him load the lumber. And what did you ask him?
Where do you buy your nails? He didn't buy it from us. And he said, your nails are lousy. They bend, they break. And I didn't believe it. I went back in the store, got a board, got some nails, started banging them in, and they broke and they bent. And I couldn't believe it. And so somebody wasn't listening. One of our merchants was not listening. He evidently was in love with his vendor. But I could tell you that day, all those nails were out of the stores. So we ran the business for about 2 weeks where we didn't have a nail in the store until we found a new vendor that we trusted. But, the thing with the office, that's very typical. We wanted our people to be on the floor of the store. And if they weren't on the floor of the store, what are you there for? There was another time, I don't know if I had it in the book, Catherine, I don't remember, but I came in the store on a Monday and I toured some stores before I gave a class. And Monday, no manager was on the floor of the store.
Oh, yeah.
And I came back, we had the meeting, and I said, I went through 5 stores and no manager was on the floor because somebody explained to me, I gave them all immunity. By the way, their bosses weren't there. And everybody was okay to say whatever you wanted to say. No one ever got fired for complaining or telling us the truth. And they said we have so much paperwork that we have to stay in there Monday all day doing paperwork. So I said, do you think it's important? And they said no. So I went back home. I got a stamp called.
There it is.
Oh, it's out there. You got it in there? I didn't see it.
Yeah, I love it.
And I sent it back to the stores. And I said, from here on in, just stamp everything and we'll go back to the merchant and we'll find out whoever put that piece out that they'll realize the burden they're putting on you. And after a while, we just cut that out. They suddenly got it. They suddenly realized they didn't want to put the pressure on the people in the stores. That's listening. It's just listening to people. People are pretty smart. I found out, smart things from people who you wouldn't expect that from. There was a part-time employee that told me, I asked him why he didn't have any merchandise on the floor. And he said, there's no room on the shelf. And I said, what do you mean there's no room on the shelf? He said, well, we bring a case in at 24 and we sell it the first day. And then we have to wait for the rest to come in. So I said, why don't you order more? And they said, well, we have no place to put it. So I said, why don't you just stack it on the floor? And so that's how we stacked merchandise on the floor, where we knew we needed the volume on the floor. It's all from listening to somebody. You're not the smartest guy in the world. You don't know everything in the world. And you learn from people.
And Bernie, I think that employee had been with you for 90 days and was like a teenager. It was unexpected.
He saved us millions of dollars. Millions of dollars.
And a lot of your employees and associates made millions of dollars just through their careers at Home Depot, which is also very admirable. And another thing I found very admirable is that you and your fellow executives capped your salaries, $2 million. This is unheard of now, and I'm sure it was even unheard of back then. How was this decision made, and what impact did this have on the company?
Well, it was Arthur and I decided to do that. We knew that if we could get our associates to believe that this is their business, that they would work harder, they would work smarter, they would be more dependable. And the only way we thought we could do that was to not take options, but to give it out to everybody else. And so Arthur and I, we went to the board and we said to the board, there will never be an option for Arthur or myself. Just the two of us. Never be an option. And we're going to give the options out to people in the stores. And we did, so that everybody owned a piece of the rock. Everybody had a piece. And boy, did they break their ass. They did. It was their business. And, they would lose a customer for any reason whatsoever, because they knew it was their money and it was their part. Plus the fact they appreciated the fact that we weren't getting rich on them. That if the company was successful, we would be successful, and so would they.
That's an amazing social and even governance policy. And, in 2001, the year you retired, Home Depot won the award for most socially responsible company, which I'm sure felt really good. And today, the lack of this level of leadership has resulted in a lot of regulation and ESG policies. And ESG seems aligned with your philosophies in a way, but I know you hate bureaucracy. And your friend Sam Walton had a quote in the book about how bureaucracy was like cockroaches. You only see it when you turn on the light. Right. So what are your thoughts on ESG? And do you have ideas on better ways to approach this kind of equity?
Look, I don't think a fat cat in Wall Street has the ability, the sense, or the understanding of setting a policy for anybody. Who makes him so smart? Why is he setting a policy? I know one thing. A company is set up to sell a product, to make a profit, to hire people, to make their lives better, to sell to customers, and increase the wealth. That's the way you increase wealth, not the way these people do it. I mean, these guys at BlackRock, it's such a crock, it's unbelievable. I'm so happy to see that states are kicking back now. They control the voting. You go into a boardroom today and you vote on something and you're not voting. They are. This one guy in Wall Street is voting your share on something he believes that you may not believe. And I think it's undemocratic, frankly, really undemocratic. And I'm happy to see that states are fighting back.
Well, and Trey, can I add something? Bernie, you and I had this conversation yesterday, right? About ESG and sort of all of the policies that have now become sort of common in regulations. What's interesting about Home Depot is that they were doing all of this early on. Home Depot was if you were willing to work, Home Depot would hire you. A lot of people without a high school education, a lot of great sort of rags to riches stories, a lot of women in leadership, right? And we tell a great story about Anne Marie, who now, was a Jamaican immigrant, and also sort of really focused on social sort of issues like veterans, for example, making sure that veterans, were treated fairly and cared for and hired, both in the stores, but also supporting veterans' causes, but also the philanthropy of the company in natural disasters. So if you look at this environmental, social, and governance, Home Depot was doing all of that really early. And if other business leaders were like Arthur and Bernie, we wouldn't need all of this, right? They just naturally did it because they did the right thing. They created the right culture.
That's an amazing case study. Yeah.
We didn't need them. We were way ahead of them. Way ahead of them.
Well, I mentioned your friend, Sam Walton, and I kind of want to touch on this point. One of my favorite parts of the book was reading about your travels with Sam, especially visiting each other's stores. What impact did Sam have on you and your business?
Oh, enormous impact. Policies. We went to everyday low prices because of Sam Walton. One day, he sat me down with David Glass, his president. We had lunch, and he said, "This is the last meeting we're going to have. If you keep running sales the way you do and don't sell everyday low prices, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." I said, "Sam, that's pretty powerful stuff." And I went back and I thought about it, and I said, geez, he is 100% right. And I changed the company. I went back. I sat with Arthur. I said, we're changing the philosophy. We had to move out. Some merchants couldn't deal with it because they believed in sales so that you kept a product off the shelf until it went on sale. Why not sell it every day at a sale price? And so that's where everyday sales came from. And I had an impact on him the same way. There were a lot of things I gave him on efficiency, on how to be efficient in the stores that he listened to very carefully. He was a great guy and smart as hell. As I said, I think he's one of the great retailers of all time.
He was also he was also very frugal, I imagine, as well. There's a lot of stories of you riding around in his truck with the broken air conditioning.
He was a nutcase.
I was going to say, did that wear off on you? Did you pick up any of that frugality from him?
Hell no. You kid driving around that stupid little truck at 95 or 98 degrees temperature with humidity. My underwear was soaking wet. My socks were wet. And I said, why the hell did you put an air conditioner in? It's an old car. It doesn't need the air conditioning. And this is what he drove. I mean, he was a strange guy. Very strange. He did everything for the business, nothing for himself.
Catherine, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have something?
No, not at all. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to I was hoping Bernie was going to tell the wet underwear story because it's one of my favorites. But there's also really funny when you read the book, the moon pie story. Bernie always gives Sam a ton of credit for just being an amazing merchandiser. But don't send Bernie Marcus a moon pie. I'm just telling you when you read that story.
Don't ever eat a moon pie. That's all I can tell you. It's disgusting. But he made it an industry. They built factories to make moon pies because Sam Walton sold it and people bought it. And so don't ask me why, but he was a genius in retailing.
Someone like you who has met some of the most impressive people of the world, like Sam and other politicians and presidents, I mean, all kinds of people you've come across. I always pay attention to the folks that you say stood out most to you. And in the book, you highlight George Schultz. So how exactly did George influence you?
Well, George got involved. I got involved with George. George was very much involved with the state of Israel. When he left Secretary of Defense, not defense, but
Secretary of State.
Of State, he had this interest in a student that worked for him. And I'll tell you the story. This student worked for him, an Israeli, and it was before the 48 war, or one of those wars, the 7-day or whatever it was. And he was the most brilliant student he ever had. And he had him over his house many times to have dinner with his wife. And one day, he knocked on his door and he said, "I want to say goodbye. I'm going home to fight for my country." And George said, "You should stay here, get your education. You'll be able to help Israel in a different way." And he said, "No, I'm going back to fight for my country." And he went back, and unfortunately, he was killed. And George never forgot that guy. And many years passed by, I was with George when George met the mother of this young man, and they embraced like they were the oldest friends in the world. George was very emotional about that. And he said, people that would give up their lives for their country are people that I admire. And this young man was one. And he got involved with me with Israel Democracy Institute, became a major part of it, became a chairman, a co-chair with me. And for years, we operated together up until the time he was about 98 years old. And my last meeting with him he was about 99 years old. We were looking forward to his 100th birthday, which was just around the corner. And he was as sharp and as bright as the day I met him. He remembered every conversation we ever had. He would quote me on conversations. I mean, just that I had 10 years before, he would quote me on what I had said. He was just brilliant. He gave me a viewpoint of the world. How else could a guy from Newark, a kid from Newark, growing in a tenement, be around somebody like a George Schultz? It just happened to be one of the great, what should I call it? Something that comes to you that collateral. It's a collateral benefit that I got meeting prime ministers and presidents and senators and all of those people by the position of being with Home Depot. The success of Home Depot allowed me to knock on a lot of doors and be allowed in.
You've contributed a lot to Israel through your philanthropy. You've actually donated over $2 billion now to various charitable organizations, veterans, cancer research, autism, just to name a few. The Marcus Foundation is involved in a number of initiatives, especially in medicine as well. So I'm curious, what are some of the initiatives that you're most proud of or just most passionate about today?
Well, I'm still passionate about autism, which we started 40 some odd years ago when nobody knew what autism was. And we have continued with it. As I say in the book, don't just write a check, stay involved. And we helped the thing grow. It's now probably one of the best and the strongest autism treatment centers in the world. That's number one. Number two is our Avalon Action Network. You know, did you watch the football game with Tua?
Where he got very injured. Yeah.
He had traumatic brain injury. Do you know there's no treatment for it?
I believe
There's no treatment for it. And we have veterans that came back from the war who've been struggling, who can't function. They're dizzy. They can't sleep at night. They're in pain. They can't focus. and there's no treatment for them. So like Mike Milken setting out to do something about prostate cancer, we decided to take this on. And we took it on. We found the right people. We opened up an institute in Denver, and we came up with a protocol that actually works on concussions and traumatic brain injury. Today, it's the only one that we're aware of. And we're growing this now, and this is our future thing. We're gonna make this one of the biggest things in the United States, so that eventually becomes protocol for everybody. But we also have a treatment for post-traumatic stress called Boulder Crest, which is an 8-day treatment for people that don't have traumatic brain injury, but have all these problems. That's firemen, policemen, that's military, that's nurses, that's doctors, that's people who go through trauma every day, see something. And this is a big deal. And it's something that we're putting our life and line on today. And we're spending a lot of energy and time. And we have the protocol that works. The key is we have the facts, and the facts show it works. And as we spread out, more and more places will take it on. And eventually we hope that every hospital in the United States takes this on. This is a big deal. This is like changing the way medicine is practiced with traumatic brain injury.
Speaking about the change of medicine, I share a passion with you for integrative medicine. And there's a part in the book talking about your experience with Dr. George Zabrecki and the field of integrated medicine. I'm curious how that area of medicine has impacted your life as well.
Well, he saved my life twice, literally twice. And where nobody else could, he did. And he did it with integrated medicine. Once he did it with a root of a tree from the Amazon, where I was on the verge of dying because I had an infection in my system. And George hopped in and saved my life. And we're trying to show that integrated medicine, along with regular medicine, can operate. There are people that can be helped by acupuncture, massage, nutrition. Big deal. Nobody spends time on nutrition. Most doctors don't spend any time on it. And yet nutrition can develop all kinds of problems if you don't have the right kind of nutrition for people. So that's integrated medicine. And we're happy that we're able to open the school at Jefferson, where all of the interns are taught integrative medicine. The only one in the United States that we're aware of.
I'm actually an entrepreneur as well. My day job is running a kombucha tea business that my wife and I started. And actually a portion of our profits goes to the City of Hope program in natural therapies, which is speaking to that integrative medicine piece where those things don't typically get funded in other ways. And so I was incredibly proud and impressed of your long-time partnership with City of Hope and being on the board for so long. What hope have you seen come out of your time and contributions from City of Hope?
Oh my God. Bone marrow transplant. I was there the day they voted it. It was a day the doctor had approached them for funding for bone marrow transplants. They didn't have the money for it, but he was so emphatic about speaking to the board. And I happened to be on a board my first day. And he spoke to the board and he talked about bone marrow transplant and how this could change the life of thousands and thousands of people all over the world. And the board bought it. And the board voted that day and contributed money. And I remember I gave $5,000. That was the most I could give. But other board members gave a lot of money. And that became a major part of City of Hope. As you know, since you're involved with City of Hope, how many thousands and thousands of people and how many thousands of people in other hospitals now do bone marrow transplant and how many lives it's saved. It all started that day at the City of Hope.
Well, even though you couldn't afford Harvard Medical School, it's ironic that maybe you've contributed more to the field of medicine through these philanthropic endeavors. It's really quite incredible, actually. And one other fun, I would say, a philanthropic endeavor is the Georgia Aquarium. And that was also fascinating because it felt a little bit like an entrepreneurial endeavor for you as well. It seemed you guys got that spirit again, getting really enthusiastic about the ideas that went into it. So it required $250 million from you in an investment or donation, if you will. What was the impetus ultimately for you? And I mean, this is not the Bernie Marcus Aquarium. You named it the Georgia Aquarium. And I also found that quite admirable as well.
Well, at one point, my wife and I sat together, and when we came to Atlanta, we didn't have much money. And all the money we made was made in Georgia through the Home Depot. And we wanted to do something really spectacular. People were trying to get us to open a symphony hall, other people, a hospital, a children's hospital, things like that. And I said, why don't we do something that's fun? Why don't we do something that everybody would enjoy? And I was in Israel, and I happened to be with Roy Barnes. I wasn't with him. I met him there, and I gave him a ride back on a plane. And for 12 hours, we talked about what we could do in the state of Georgia to make it different. And somehow the aquarium came up. I love aquariums. I love big fish. And he said to me, Roy, if you like big fish, why don't you just open the aquarium? I said, well, I don't think there's ever been an aquarium that isn't on the ocean or a lake or a river. And that's not Atlanta. And he said, why don't you do it? Well, I came back, got off the plane and came back to my wife, Billy, and I said, we're going to open an aquarium. And it wasn't putting up the money. We actually were involved in every facet of that. Billy and I traveled around the country. We looked at aquariums all over the world. We picked the animals. We want belugas. We want whale sharks. We want this. We want that. And then we built the aquarium to accommodate all the fish and mammals that we wanted. And so it was a labor of love. And when I went to the State House and made the announcement, I said, this is going to change Georgia. We are going to make Georgia a place where people will come here to visit, not just because convention center or business, but because there's some great attraction. And although we have, the Braves, we got the Falcons, we got the Hawks, it's not the same. And I said, this is going to have an impact, an economic impact on Atlanta. We got the land, fortunately, through Coca-Cola. They donated the land. And I could tell you that billions of dollars was spent in the area. If you looked at that area before and after, you would see how much economic benefit it did for the state of Georgia. Created jobs, restaurants, hotels, everything. But it's still a labor of love. It's a place I love to go. I still love fish, big fish.
Well, I will be in Atlanta actually in a couple of weeks for Thanksgiving. So I'll be taking my two boys to the aquarium for the first time. And I'm excited to see how they take
All right,
to it. It's super fun.
We're going to make sure that you get a special trip.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, but the last few minutes we have, I have a couple questions around health and happiness, if you don't mind. So
sure.
You're 93, and by any metric, you've lived now a long and successful life. You've lived the American dream. What have you determined to be the secret to both health and to happiness?
Looking forward, not looking back. People say to me, have you made mistakes in your life? And I say, holy, are you kidding? Look where I am. How bad could it have been? What mistake could I have made that would have affected me? I mean, I'm at this position in my life today. I have everything I want. My family is taken care of. I've done the things I want to do. I met people, other people I've never met. I said, why would I look back? Catherine is the one that got me to look back. She's the only one that drew me back and forced me to look at what happened in the past. It was a kind of regurgitation of myself, but half of these things you read in the book, I never thought about. Never thought about, ever. But they did happen, but they were great experiences. And I think that life has been great for me. And I'm blessed. God has blessed me with a good life and a good family and a good wife and good friends. And of course, I can't forget my associates, author Ken Lango, Ron Brill, all the people around me who helped make me who I am. I'm a product of all of them. Believe me, I'm not a one-man show. I never was a one-man show. It was a group effort, but a group that knew how to work together.
Were your parents around to witness the success you achieved from Home Depot?
No, unfortunately.
Well, you were a successful man prior to that already, so at least they got to see some of what you became. I mean, it's just an incredible legacy that you've left behind.
But could I just add one thing? When you asked about Bernie's health and happiness, what made the book really fun to write with Bernie was he's 93 years old and he's working as hard today as he was working in 1979 to build Home Depot. But what really came out in the book, and Bernie, you might want to talk for just a moment about all the philanthropy is wonderful in saving people's lives. And the idea of giving is so much better than getting. And that old adage has, for Bernie, certainly proved true. I mean, Bernie, you should tell the story about how people thank you when they see you.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you left out of this interview is why I wrote the book. I really wrote it for two reasons. Number one, for my grandchildren. But the second reason I wrote it was to try to convince people out there who I know, who are great people. In the community I live here in Boca Raton, there are great entrepreneurs who are very effective, ran great businesses, and they retired. And then when we retired, they just threw in their shoes. They quit life. And they play golf. They go shopping at Home Depot and Costco, and that's their life. I mean, and I say, why'd you do that? A good friend of mine, Howard Halpern, told me yesterday, he was here yesterday. He's also one of these entrepreneurs, great entrepreneurs, just raised an awful lot of money for something called JARC. He hadn't done that before. He's become a great fundraiser, and he's going to build a great institution. He's taking it on. He's doing exactly what I did, relatively speaking. And so there are people out there I'm trying to incentivize. Don't give up. I've met multi-billionaires who come to me and say they're sitting on a ton of money and they don't know what to do with it. They'd like to give it away. They don't know how to do it. They don't know where to do it. They don't know if they should do it. And kick up some dust is a way of trying to stimulate them to do it, to go into something, put their brains into it. Be like a Mike Milken, for crying out loud. But you don't have to do Mike Milken. You do what my friend Howard Halpern did with the JARC. And it could be smaller communities, but you can make an impact. And the impact that you make will change your life. People will appreciate you to an extent that you will not understand. When you save a life and you look that person in the face, the amount of emotion that'll go through you will amaze you. And it'll give you more incentive to continue on and do better things. That's the reason for the book.
You touch on destiny a couple of times in the book. How much do you attribute luck or destiny to the success that you've had?
Oh, a lot of things. A lot of things happen to me because I say it's Bashir. I met somebody, boom, and something happened really great. I think that's destiny. The first job I had with two guys from Harrison, running across Herbie Hupstrin, who's my first mentor. That was pure luck, running into him into a store at the one time, on the one day that he happened to be in a store on that one month. He'd not been in that store in a month. And I happened to grab him on that day. Well, what do you call that? I call that luck. So there are a lot of people, and it happens over and over again in my life.
Well, Bernie, you've had an incredible life, a incredible career. When you wrote this book, I'm not sure how much you are aware how much of an influence it's going to have on a lot of people. And I believe it's going to have a tremendous impact for many people. And they're going to be inspired to give as much as you've given. And again, I'm just incredibly honored to have you on the show. And I really appreciate the book and for your time today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I have a super informative episode in store for you today, as I'm going to be doing an intrinsic value analysis on Dollar General and Apple stock.